from Champions Grille. You know this. I'm here with Casey McAllister, to my left. Casey?
Hey, how's it going?
Casey did this thing before we started. We all were trying to get the bill from Brooke, and we said, I'll pay. And then Craig said he'll pay, and Jacob said he'll pay.
Right.
And then Casey came in over the top and said, I'm paying for the bill. I tried forcibly. I tried to give him my money. He wouldn't take it. So now I'm going to go beat him up afterwards because he paid for my meal.
To be fair, I only did it as like the courtesy thing.
That's right.
I never intended on paying,
right.
but I had to act like I would, right?
That's right. And for those of you who do not know, that new voice is Craig Sandlin for the very first time, joining us live. You might have seen him on the YouTube side of things. They do Chatterbox Bengals every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, asterisks whenever the Bengals play a game. But he is here in person, Champions Grille on the west side of Cincinnati for the very first time. Craig, how does it feel?
This is great. This is like I'm at home.
Magic.
I mean, Champions Grill, where everybody knows your name now.
That's right. That's right. That's what we are here. And we're here with Jacob Tissett. Jacob, the shining star.
We can say that.
Well, I'm going to say it.
You held it down, man.
So on Saturday, for those of you who don't know, we do a live stream for every single Bengals game on our YouTube, Chatterbox Sports. Feel free to check that out.
It's a grand old time. We got a couple of chat guys here.
A couple of chat guys. We'll shout them out later. Jacob does it every single game live for the whole entirety of the game. And no matter what happens, Jacob's on stream. I did it on Saturday for the very first time, and it was the Broncos game, and it was an overtime thriller. I hated it so much because I had to actually suffer through it on a camera. Usually when you suffer through these games, at least for me all year, I'm in the comfort of my own house.
Absolutely.
I go in my car and I cry, but I had to do it on camera, and I don't know how Jacob's done it all season long, but honestly, Jacob, I give you a lot of credit for suffering through the misery that this season has brought us.
I'm usually a sinker. I sit on the couch. Usually I get real deep in the chair for games like this, but not this year. It's been all out there, and then Craig joins me afterwards and usually has to carry my limp dead body through a post-game show. But it's been a grand old time. I've loved every minute of it, and thank you to everyone that's tuned in.
Again, we are live on YouTube every single day off the bench from 10 to 12. We are on the radio every day from 1 to 3, ESPN 1410 Wing AM. Check us out there. Check us out on YouTube. We got a bunch of different content things happening all throughout the week, so feel free to check out Chatterbox Sports. But now, we are going to start the show. This is our final show, possibly. So I'm going to try to be positive.
Okay.
We're going to try to be mostly positive for the show.
When people talk about you and your fandoms, they usually say Elliot Rearing, the positive guy.
I am the positive guy. I'm Mr. Positive.
Right.
I try to keep it calm. So I'm going to will it to be the most positive show of the year. Since losing to the Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals have won 3 straight games. They're now in a position to make the playoffs, or at least have meaningful football in Week 18. I thought that was a realistic possibility after you lost that Steelers game. You guys, your thoughts coming into this final game of the season. Did you have the expectation that they'd pack it in, that they'd bench guys, or did you think that they were going to be fighting? They'd have a realistic shot at the postseason in the final week of the season.
I was team pack it in. I was
First
team
of all,
pack it in.
I was team. I thought Elliot could count. We've won 4 straight games, Elliot.
4
not
straight
3.
games. Sorry.
Four straight games.
That's right. Which one did I forget?
That's a great question. I can't answer that for you, but the Bengals are on a 4-game winning streak right now.
Okay, I was wrong.
Going into this
4
week,
games.
so
All right.
That's how you get back to 500 when you start at 4-8.
Okay, so
you gotta win 4.
500, easy 500.
Yeah.
But I thought it was over, and I thought they were going to pack it in. Casey, you were on my side, right? You thought they were going to pack it in?
Yeah, I thought they were going to pack it in. I thought they were done.
You thought they were done. Jacob?
I thought they were done, especially the way they lost that Steelers game, 44-38. That should have packed it in.
This guy's been on the playoff machine every day for the last 3 months.
You got to let me finish. And then you look at the schedule, you see Cowboys, Titans, Browns with Cooper Rush, a combination of Mason Rudolph, Will Levis, and DTR. And you had to have thought, even looking at those 3 games, well, maybe we could sneak back in. So if they didn't pack it in, I always knew they'd have a shot.
Oh, yeah. So, Craig, you're the most optimistic out of all 4 of us, bar none. Bar none. You, Mr. Some of the Reds games, the regular season doesn't really matter, right? That's all the games matter come Bengals time, and they lost a lot of meaningful ones.
Started week 1. Started week 1. And Jacob will tell you, I mean, I think it was after the Ravens game. I stole your line, and I said the 2024 season is officially over.
I like that.
And I said it after the Ravens game when they dropped that one. Look, as positive as I am, I'm a realist too. And when you look around the league and you look at the teams that were potentially in the playoffs or the schedule that remained, everything was leaning towards this Bengals kind of crap in the bed, as Jacob was saying. So I was, unfortunately, the negative one. Jacob's in the playoff machine every single day trying to find scenarios, trying to figure out how do they back their way in. And he was maintaining hope. Meanwhile, I was out from day one. And unfortunately, then they followed that up with the loss to the Chargers, an ugly loss that left me embarrassed in the middle of a sports bar in Los Angeles and had to leave early because of how poor that performance was early on. And luckily, they battled back, but it was not pretty at that point. And
I'm going to make this the most positive show ever, saying that. Which game was the most heartbreaking?
Okay, that's a good question.
Which loss was the worst? I'm going to put my vote in right now, and I still think, as bad as the Patriots' loss was, losing the Chargers game the way you lose it, and maybe it's a unanimous decision here, that Chargers game was absolutely disgusting. Not only did it cement that this team just doesn't have it, it also cemented the fact that one of the guys you paid coming into the season, one of the very few guys you actually paid,
it's always a core piece,
couldn't do his job when the moment mattered the most. And that's what I took away. It destroyed my hopes and dreams for this season, but the Chargers game just destroyed me. Craig?
I mean, I thought the Ravens games were really the ones that destroyed me. And the Chargers game was tough because of the timing, right? Like, at that point, you thought, okay, well, we got to beat the Chargers in order to back our way into the playoffs. And then you go in and you lose that way, and it was certainly heartbreaking. But you look at both of the Ravens games in the matter of how much those two games mattered in the grand scheme of things. To lose both of those games the way that you lost them, one of which in overtime, those are the ones that stick out to me.
Casey?
You know, I'm actually going to go with a unique one. I'm going to say the first Steelers loss.
Okay.
I think that one was the most heartbreaking because we just couldn't stop the Steelers, and it was demoralizing. It really felt like at that point they had basically packed it in. Now that we're in contention, like if they just came out of that bye week ready to go, like maybe they could have had something, but yeah, that one was a tough loss.
Speaking of that Steelers game, let's take a quick look back at the time the Bengals lost to the Steelers that very first time, 44-38. Russell Wilson, a career best, I mean, his second best game of his career. 29 for 38, 414 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did throw a pick six, so the Bengals got off to an early jump again and were unable to capitalize yet again. Najee Harris, 16 times for 75 yards, 16 rushes for 75 yards. Harris, Warren, Freiermuth, and Pickens all had 50-plus receiving yards. Bengals offense was there, but again, as Casey said, defense wasn't even close. Jamar, T. Gesicki all heavily involved since that game. We know the Bengals defense has played a little bit better. I know the competition hasn't exactly been great, but the defense has been a little bit better. Do you expect it to be more of the same in this game on Saturday, or do you maybe expect it to be the defensive game? Maybe a little bit of a fight from our defense.
Not only is the Bengals defense playing better than the last time we played the Steelers offense looks way worse. And I know they took a major step in that game, 44 points. That's not something they did against anyone else.
Sure.
But even the time leading up to that first matchup, they were clicking. They were playing well.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson was winning games. And now since that game, they've been floundering and really not looking very competitive offensively. So I think a combination of the two is going to give the Bengals defense a better performance and enough that hopefully they can stick in the game. And we lost 44-38. 38 points will win on Saturday.
100%. And you mentioned that terrible offense. The Steelers have been 1-3 since that Bengals game. They have not eclipsed 17 points.
Yeah.
Russell's last 3 games, he hasn't eclipsed 217 yards, including, I think, 120 against the Eagles. I think Waters kind of find its level here. I think there was a little bit of a stretch that where the Steelers were able to score kind of at will, and this Russell Wilson looked like the guy that Denver thought they were getting. But I think you're now seeing why they kind of let him go and why Sean Payton wanted him out of town. I think you give the fresh start with Bo Nix, opposed to seeing if Russell Wilson can maybe find his old self. There's been flashes of it. It just hasn't been consistent enough for the Steelers this year. They've had multiple games where they've won by only kicking field goals. I think 2 games this year where they legitimately only kicked field goals and walked away with victories. It's just unheard of. And I think you kind of see this thing with Mike Tomlin, who I respect. I think I would trade Mike Tomlin for Zach Taylor in a heartbeat. He's able to get to 500. He's in that game above it. Right after you get to 9 is when the wheels look like it falls off.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of seeing that. Has Water found its level with the Steelers? Do you think the Steelers are any sort of problem in the postseason for anybody?
Well, I think the thing that hasn't been talked about is that George Pickens is really what makes that offense go. And Russell Wilson, during the 3-game stretch where George Pickens didn't play, really floundered and wasn't able to really get anything going. George Pickens comes back last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Then Russell Wilson goes 23 of 37, only 205 yards. Didn't find the end zone, which was interesting, in a really kind of low-scoring, ugly game from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think ultimately having another week with George Pickens back at practice, getting them back on track, I don't expect it to be a 44-30 shootout like we had the first time, but I do expect that this will be another high-scoring game, probably in that upper 20s to low 30s range.
Primetime Bengals, I'll tell you what, Roger Goodell's getting his money's worth with the Bengals this year. I think
Is there more of a sure thing in the NFL than the Bengals giving you a good game?
I think so. I think that's about it. They're the only team in NFL history to have 5 road postseason,
road
primetime games. Absolutely incredible that the Bengals were able to even have a chance at this very moment. I know it's disappointing. I know everything just hasn't fallen our way, but through it all, having a chance in Week 18 is what I personally asked for. As a Reds fan, it's what I asked for. It's a sad bar to climb, but that's the bar nonetheless. Turnovers. Turnovers were a large part of last game. 2 fumbles, 2 big fumbles by Joe Burrow, and an interception. You don't make silly mistakes, you win that game. I think we're all aware of what the Steelers' defense is capable of. Is this offensive line, and we're going to talk about the injuries coming up next, but is this offensive line going to be able to stand up one more time against maybe the most ferocious defense in the league?
We talked about it on Tuesday night's Chatterbox Bengals with some of our key plays, and Orlando Brown really looked more like Orlando Brown in this last game against the Broncos, and that is so massive because when we talk about our offensive line all the time, we usually talk about 2 good ones and 3 bad ones.
That's right.
In reality, it's really been more like 3 good ones and 2 bad ones when Orlando Brown's been out there. The tackles, Orlando and Amarius Mims have been really, really good this year. And Ted Karras has been one of the better centers in football.
Yeah.
He just happens to be surrounded by the worst guards that have ever played football together. So Kappa and Volson, they're just not a sustainable guard duo. It's the least athletic duo in the league, and you can't keep walking them out there. That's why Cody Ford has been sliding into that guard spot when Orlando Brown has been healthy. I think if they're all ready to play, we get a little bit of that O-line we saw earlier this year when we were saying, maybe this is one of the better O-lines in Burrow's career. Maybe a flash of that this weekend. It's still a struggle going against this Pittsburgh defense, but at least getting healthy, it's a good sign.
J.J. Watt going to get a sack in this one?
J.J. Watt will not.
He will not. No
T.J.
sack.
Watt might.
Sorry. You know what I meant. T.J. Watt. Sorry. They're all the same. You can't have 2 brothers and they both have relatively the same names.
That's fair.
Can't happen.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the turnovers, and ultimately that was a big piece of it. The Steelers in the last game in the second quarter tied it 21-21.
Yeah.
And then the Bengals go out. Joe Burrow strip fumble and lose the ball. They give up a field goal then, and then another field goal to end that, and they're down 27-21. Then you fast forward to the third quarter. The Bengals get the field goal. They give up a touchdown to the Steelers, but then Joe Burrow throws an interception. The defense comes out. They get their punt, and they stop the Steelers. But what happens next? They give it up, fumble again, give up the defensive touchdown to the Steelers, and all of a sudden it was 41-24, and you're looking back at that point. The Bengals score 14 unanswered to end it, but unable to get the ball back after their last touchdown. Turnovers are the key and really have been the key in some of these key losses throughout the season. You look at the Kansas City loss as well. When Joe Burrow lost that fumble for the 6th, that really ended up being the proving point as well.
And that's what you saw on Saturday night against the Broncos. You were able to play relatively free, turnover-free football. It came down to 1 T Higgins fumble, but I think he'd earned a fumble in that game.
Certainly made up for it.
The balls just haven't bounced the Bengals' way this season, and it's been something that you've had the ability to capitalize on luck in years past. There has been a little bit of luck. The Kansas City Chiefs get luck every single week, it seems like. Good teams find their own luck. They make their own luck. The Bengals this year just weren't good enough to make their own luck. Outside of the Cowboys game, one miracle. We got one miracle this year. It was against the Dallas Cowboys, but it comes down to the silly mistakes. Are you going to be able to play clean football against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense and force Russell Wilson to become the Super Bowl champion Russell Wilson from the Seahawks? I don't think so. I mentioned the injury concern. Amarius Mims, questionable. You have T Higgins, questionable. Chase Brown, questionable. Charlie Browns, Cam Taylor-Britt, Drew Sample, all questionable. Are you going to be able to overcome this? Casey, I think you're one of the bigger Drew Sample guys on this podcast, outside of our good friend Reed Mouse.
That's right.
Will these losses at some point, and I imagine at least 3 of them will play. I'm going to take a wild shot and say T Higgins is going to suit up. I don't know about our running back, but I do think if you're able to get Amarius Mims, if he's going to be able to fight through a broken hand or whatever he's dealing with right now, I think you have a chance in this game. But how concerned are you with the turnovers? turnovers with the injuries.
I mean, it's pretty serious. I mean, you can't lose your starting right tackle. You can't lose T Higgins. And Chase Brown has been an irreplaceable part of this offense. I think those are huge losses if they don't suit up. But at the same time, like, I think Joe Burrow can overcome a lot. I think he can overcome this particular issue on this team right now. And he's playing unbelievable right now. I think if you were to look at how he started right after the bye week, not how he intended, but after that, he's been playing pretty clean football since then. So for me, I think it is a big deal, but Joe Burrow is just so great. I think that he can overcome some of these issues. And like you said, I do think T Higgins probably will play. Amarius Mims, he played like part of the game last week, and then
was frustrated when he came out too.
Yeah,
was visibly frustrated.
I don't know what the plan is there. The Chase Brown one to me is a bit of a more of a big deal because the running back situation. I mean, the only guy that has had surmountable snaps on the team, I guess, after Chase Brown is Khalil Herbert, and he's played all of 5 snaps on this team.
Looked good for 4 out of them. I think 4 out of 5 was good.
Yeah,
and then it came down to the one fumble that he didn't get credit for. But outside of that.
That was his first carry, too.
Outside of
the
that.
The Bengals did activate today off the practice squad running back Kendall Milton, the old Georgia product. So not a great sign in terms of Chase Brown's availability. Usually if you're going to activate a running back like that this late in the week when you have a guy on the injury list as questionable, it's not a good thing. So not looking like Chase Brown's going to be playing, but just the fact that he has a chance to play after the way that injury looked.
Yep.
And we're at this point in the season with the Bengals, you can't help but look forward to next year a little bit.
Yep.
And if Chase Brown in week 17 had suffered an injury that had kept him out for the majority of next regular season, that would have been such a soul-crushing blow. So it's great that he's at least questionable, even though I don't think he's going to play.
I mentioned it earlier. The Broncos game was incredible. It happened Saturday night. Bengals escaped with a victory, but the Chase Brown injury that happened, I'd argue, and we can do a little bit of it right now because I want to hear Craig's thoughts. Because believe it or not, when I did the post-game show with Craig, I think we didn't discuss this a ton. I talked about Zach Taylor. I think I went on a 45-minute Zach Taylor rant that Craig had to reel it in. But I think running the ball there in that situation, it's first down, you're at the 6-yard line, Broncos have a timeout left, there's 1:30 left. It makes no sense to me that if you're going to run the ball on the first play and then take knees after that, why would you not just take 3 knees to begin with? And that's what Zach Taylor said was going to happen. It's why I've had issues with Zach Taylor. It's why I think Zach Taylor shouldn't be the head coach of the Bengals at this very moment. But right now, you're down a running back, presumably. If he plays, great. He still might not be 100% Chase Brown, which is what we've had, luckily, for the better part of this season. I think it's a silly play. Craig, your thoughts?
Well, Jacob and I talked about this on Tuesday night. I go back even before they got down to the goal line. We start the drive with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on the clock and a 24-17 game after that drive. At the time, it's 17-17. You get the ball at your own 41-yard line with 2.5 minutes to go.
Yep.
But the very first play, you hit Jamar Chase for a 38-yard gain to get down to the Denver 21 in the 2-minute warning.
Yep.
At that point, they waste only 9 seconds running their next 2 plays by throwing the ball and don't take any time off of that clock. So by the time they got down to the 6, the minute 39 was poor clock management, but that clock management to begin at that 21-yard line is ultimately what really did them in. Once that injury happened and the timeout happened and you leave it with Denver with their last timeout, it becomes a little bit of a moot point. But if you had taken your time on the first part after that 2-minute warning, none of that really mattered because you wouldn't have even been down to the 6 until there was under a minute to go. So for me, it all started even before that. Once that 2-minute warning hits and you're in field goal range, what it told me is that Zach Taylor doesn't trust his kicking game right now, which rightfully so, potentially.
He got proven right.
But ultimately, if you don't trust Cade York to hit a 38-yarder, then he shouldn't be your kicker.
Correct.
And that's what this comes down to for me, is that if you don't trust him to kick a 38-yard game winner with no time left, then he should not be on your team. My understanding is they brought in multiple kickers to try out for that role. There's no reason Cade York can be on your team if you don't trust him to make a 38-yarder. Regardless of what happened later on in the game, they had many, many chances to run clock. They didn't take advantage of it. Malpractice by Zach Taylor on my part.
Maybe, and by the way, I'm glad we're on this side together. Me and you are on the anti-Zach Taylor wagon, and I like that. I think that if you look around the league, it's just like no team in their right mind goes for a touchdown on that final play of the game. You throw the ball to T Higgins for a score. It's crazy to me that the Bengals have to do that. This season has been such a colossal disaster that you can't trust a kicker to make legitimately the easiest. Like, if you sent me out, I would make the kick.
There shouldn't have been a
100%.
debate. You can't kick. You can't kick.
Not anymore. Not
Ever.
anymore.
We shouldn't roster Cade York, and I'm not saying you'll get another kicker. We only have another week. Let's just have an extra active receiver. Who cares?
You can't tell me that Ryan Rekow with his leg can't kick it in the end zone.
That's what I'm saying. Look, I know how the math works. I know what the play is, and I know how it all played out. I also know how I felt watching the game.
Yeah.
And I was screaming, do not kick a field goal. Because we saw what happened when you kick a 35-yard field goal just 10 minutes later in overtime. And he shanks it. And if he misses a field goal in that situation, you don't get another chance if the defense gets a 3 and out. You lose the game.
Yeah. I do real quick want to go back to the injury conversation that we talked about. We talked about George Pickens and the impact that he can have on a game early on. Cam Taylor-Britt today comes up with an ankle injury. We don't really know the extent of that. But Cam Taylor-Britt, going back to that first Pittsburgh game, has really had a nice string of games over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So for him to potentially miss this one, going up against a physical receiver in George Pickens, someone that you'd like to leave man-on-man a little bit, I don't know how that's going to match up. I just want to point that out, that's a big loss for this Bengals if Cam Taylor-Britt can't go.
Been able to force some turnovers down the stretch. He had the pick six, right? You mentioned that. I think he had the pick six against Pittsburgh. So, yeah, it would be a massive blow to a defense that's already reeling from just being not talented. We talk about one of these other injured guys and a guy that had a phenomenal game against Denver, T Higgins. 11 for 131, 3 touchdowns for T Higgins. I don't like having to discuss it. I know you two are tired of it. I know Casey's tired of it. We're all tired of talking about T Higgins staying with the Cincinnati Bengals. But if you don't talk about it, it's almost like we're giving up on T Higgins. That we've given up. This is the last game we'll see of T Higgins in a Bengals uniform. Because you're going to tag him. You're going to tag him next season. You're going to at least get some value for him if you decide you can't afford him and you'll trade him away. I'd argue that T. Higgins is one of the very large reasons as to why Zach Taylor is still employed. It's why this offense and Joe Burrow look the way they do. I think Joe Burrow's great. Casey said it earlier. Joe Burrow's able to make any bad situation a lot better. That's all Joe Burrow. But I think what helps him, too, is having guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins who work so well together, who are best friends off the field. Having a guy like that who just switched agents, switched to Jamar Chase's agent, I think that's a guy that wants to be here. I think you're seeing it out of the mouth of Joe Burrow at these press conferences. He wants it. I think everybody wants it in Cincinnati. It's just, will Mike Brown be able to pay it? And I don't know. I don't know, because I thought halfway through the year when T. Higgins was missing games consistently, and that's the fear out of every Bengals fan still.
It's the injuries.
It's the consistent injury bug that he always gets, and it's the soft tissue stuff. Having all those issues, you don't think maybe he lost some money, maybe he lost some value coming into this or during the course of this season. I think with every game he plays, I think he gets it all back.
Right.
He's gotten every value that he's lost, every value point that he's lost early on in the season. He gets it all back right now. And I don't know if you're able to pay him. I don't know if there's a realistic number if you're going to get him under $30 million. If there is, you have to at least try it, right?
So removing the orange-colored glasses in the T. Higgins conversation and really every Bengals point, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, all of that, take it all away. If you're going to test your value on the open market and try to maximize your contract, do you fire the best agent in the sport? Any player, any team, any situation?
Probably not.
No,
Probably
you don't.
not.
If you're willing to take a little less money and maybe negotiate something with a group of friends per se, maybe you go get one of their agents. I think even removing the T. Higgins Cincinnati situation, which has a lot of nuance and different pieces to it, everything that T. Higgins has done this year leads me to believe that he wants to be in Cincinnati and that he's willing to do some financial work to make that happen. Now, I'm not saying he goes to the open market, he gets 33, he's going to come back to Cincinnati for 20. That's not going to happen. If he gets 30 on the open market, could we get him for 28? Maybe. I think that's a range that's very reasonable with the way the season has progressed so far. I think you're right with him gaining his value back. We talked about it when he was out, that he might be dipping down into the Bengals can pay him range. This is the best season of his career, statistically. Most touchdowns, most yards per game, most yards per catch, everything along those lines. He'd be a top 5 receiver statistically in football if you take out the injuries and prorate his stats. So he's made all that money back. He's going to get paid like the receiver he is. I hope it's in Cincinnati. And the thing that everyone has to remember is it can work. We do have the money. Where we don't have the money is the cash in Mike Brown's pocket to put the guarantees in escrow, which is going to hang this up. There's no cap thing holding the Bengals back from signing Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T Higgins right now.
Yeah.
There's not enough big money on this roster. It's getting the money in escrow for the guarantees for those 2 wide receivers this offseason, and Mike Brown doesn't have that without taking out a loan.
I think if you look at two, and I said it on Off the Bench every day, 10 to 12 on YouTube, Off the Bench. You look at the front office, and they've been unable to successfully sign free agent defensive talent. It doesn't mean you stop. I have this issue with the Reds all the time. It seems to me like sometimes you sign a Mike Moustakas, you sign a guy like Jameer Candelario, and it doesn't work, and it maybe scares the front office like, oh, maybe we just shouldn't do it anymore. You have to continue to do it. And Reed, I think it was Reed or Casey pointed it out earlier today on the show. They've been able to do it successfully. It hasn't worked the past couple of years, but they've been able to do it. I know what happened to Sheldon Rankins. Geno Stone's been one of the worst players in football this season. It hasn't worked this year. It can work next year. There's still a chance. It's not like all hope is lost. Not like we've lost everything here. You missed on these free agents. You can get it back. My issue is I trust them to re-sign a guy that we already have than to go out, evaluate, and bring in a new defensive player. That's where I am. I don't trust the front office.
Well, and you shouldn't. I mean, let's be honest, there's been a lot of deficiencies that this front office have failed to address. There were a number of needs this past offseason that every fan of the Bengals knew needed to be addressed and weren't addressed. But all of that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that Joe Burrow is telling you publicly that he wants to keep T Higgins. It doesn't matter anything else in this conversation. Joe Burrow is on the record wanting to keep him. This week, Joe Burrow said, whenever a great player leaves, you wish you could have found a way to keep them. You don't want to make a living out of letting great players leave the building. I think that's why you've got to do everything you can to get those deals done early.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in that scenario, there's two sides to it, right? T. Higgins, you've already tagged him. To get it done early, it's too late for that. Jamar Chase, you should have got it done this past year as well. It's too late to get it done early, but you can't let either one of those leave the building. And ultimately, when T was asked about the fact that Joe Burrow keeps calling him a need, T said, yeah, I love it. A guy like him saying that about me is a good feeling. I'm not opposed to staying here, but obviously it's got to be right at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And what that means is that Mike Brown's still got to be ready to pony up because that guaranteed money is ultimately going to be the biggest holdup in this whole conversation.
I think, too, what's going to have to happen, and maybe I could be wrong on this, there's a chance if the Bengals do squeak into the playoffs here, they barely get in, and maybe you win a playoff game. I don't know if that will implement the change that's needed to wake up the front office, but maybe it brings some good vibes enough where you're like, yeah, this worked well, right? So we'll just bring everybody back. We'll bring T. Higgins back. We'll make Joe Burrow happy. We'll make Jamar Chase happy. And maybe that's the angle they took. I don't know. I don't know what they'll do, but I am a little bit scared coming into this offseason that you're going to lose significant production out of your wide receiver 2 because there is no wide receiver 2 replacement for T. Higgins. There is not. You could try to find one, and maybe there will be an aging Devontae Adams who's desperate to play winning football again. I don't know where you'll look, but you'll have to try to find somebody that will be somehow a little bit less money than T. Higgins, but get the same value. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Speaking of making the playoff scenarios, we can't do this show without mentioning this. Per the NFL's website, the wildcard website, the wildcard pitcher, we have a 5% chance. The Bengals have a 5% chance. Aaron Rodgers has made it known this might be his last game. He needs one more touchdown for 500 for his career.
I think that helps us in that he could be playing hard.
Correct.
I think that hurts us if he's out there because everyone else on the Jets hates him.
Well, Devontae likes him.
Right.
Everybody else hates him.
Everyone else hates him. Garrett Wilson said basically in a press conference, if Rodgers is the quarterback, I'm out.
That's tough. I mean, that's tough. Tua's still banged up too, so we don't know what kind of game you're going to get there. The Broncos, they're fighting for the playoffs. Yes, the Chiefs have backups in. It's going to be Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz isn't the worst quarterback to have in this scenario. Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate before a brutal injury several years ago. It could have been Chad Henne. I remember when I think Chad Henne was there for 10 years.
Carson Wentz won his most recent start.
Okay, so there's a positive.
21-20 over the 49ers as the Rams quarterback.
You see what Sam Darnold is doing. You take a look at what Baker Mayfield's doing, maybe playing for a contract. I think Jacob showed me right before the show, Carson Wentz had a quote saying, you don't miss these kind of opportunities. opportunities. You have to take advantage of them. This is a massive opportunity for a backup quarterback who's desperately trying to become a starting quarterback in this NFL once again. Andy Reid isn't coaching to lose either. I think that's the thing people forget. Andy Reid's not out there trying to go 15-2.
You take the starters out so they don't get hurt.
Correct.
Everyone on the field wants to win the football game.
Correct. Being the first team in NFL history to go 16-1, that would probably mean something in the regular season, at least a little bit. 2-4, that's what the record is in the past 10 years. Out of the 4 games, they've won twice. When it comes to last game of the season scenarios, not playing starting players. In the third game that they lost, obviously, they made it to overtime against the Chargers. They are going to be fighting. And I think there is a chance that the Kansas City Chiefs, though 10.5-point underdogs, which I think is a little bit silly, though 10.5-point dogs, I do think there's a chance they sneak in.
It doesn't do us any good, but I love that plus 10.5. I mean, we need them to win.
Correct.
But that's a lot of points.
Realistically, and I asked Craig this when we did the show on Saturday, realistically, I think I gave my number right around 10%. What are your chances that the Bengals, we'll start with Casey, what are your chances that the Bengals sneak into the postseason?
5%.
Oh, Casey,
no,
Casey, who said this is positive?
I'm trying to be as positive as I can be. I am going to be so excited if they do make it. That's why I'm going to keep my hopes down. If they just go out and surprise me, I'll be elated. I'll be so filled with joy. I just don't see it though, guys. It's going to be so tough.
This is good. You're gonna feel so much better when they get in.
Oh, I'm gonna feel so awesome when they finally do make it in. But for me, it's not even the Chiefs. It's the Dolphins versus the Jets. I mean, the Jets don't like Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
They don't like him. So
They also have to lose.
right.
For a draft pick.
100% they do. So we'll see. Jacob, your percentage. I know Craig's. We'll see if Craig's has gone up or down since I last talked to him.
Yeah, I'm sitting right around that 10 mark, right about where you're at.
Okay,
I've
all
taken
right.
the parlay. I've done all
I've
the
taken the parlay
stuff that
too.
needs to happen. I'm supporting the fellas, but yeah, it doesn't seem likely. And I'm with Casey too. The Chiefs, though they are the longest odds, I don't like the Jets' chances. That's the one that really scares me. I know it's close to a pick'em, but that game's going to be ugly, and I just think the Jets have quit.
I feel much better with the Broncos than the Broncos losing that game than having to have the Jets or the Dolphins lose. I think that one's the one that gets me. But Craig, has your number gone up or down?
Well, I think I said 18%.
You did.
I mean, that was pretty high,
You
let's
did.
be honest. I went a little high after
I like that,
after the
though.
game.
I like that.
No, I think ultimately I still believe that the Miami Dolphins going into this cold weather at the New York Jets is going to be somewhere in the low 30s at game time.
Yeah.
They've shown that Mike McDaniels has not been able to win games in the cold weather. They haven't been able to establish the running game in a way that allows them to really win the game.
Yeah.
Snoop Huntley as their backup quarterback, former Pro Bowler, but not exactly striking fear into many opponents' eyes. But the Jets are 25th in defense, and that doesn't give me a whole lot of faith either. So there's a lot of plays. Look, Carson Wentz is 32 years old. If he ever has hopes of starting in the NFL
He's
again,
just a kid.
right now is his choice. If he doesn't do it now, he's not going to get a starting job before he turns 35, and at that point, it's too late. Nobody's going to give it to him. So, you look at Joe Flacco. He earned a starting job by taking a backup job and then working his way into a starting role. And now Carson Wentz is going to have to take that same route. Sunday is his opportunity to earn himself a starting job, or at least a competition for a starting job in the NFL for next year and beyond. I'll keep it at 18. I'm still somewhat optimistic. When we watch this game on Saturday night, when the Bengals win, on Sunday at 4:25, we're all going to be tuned into our TVs, glued to it, cheering as hard as we can. And I think we've still got a chance that both of the things that we need to have happen can happen.
I haven't done the research. I would have to go back and look at this. What is the craziest scenario that's happened where a team's gotten in? And the only one I can think of is when the Bengals
Helped the Bills.
upset the Ravens, and the Bills snuck in, and there was that big watch party in their locker room, massive. They all donated to Andy Dalton's charity.
Yeah.
That's the last time I remember something like this happening. I remember the Colts choking a couple years ago to the terrible Jaguars and missing the playoffs. I don't remember a scenario quite like this one. I don't know where you'll need to win and have two different teams lose and have it work for you. It would be the ultimate good luck. For all the bad luck that this team's had this year, it would be the ultimate bounce-back good luck thing to happen.
You're right.
For sure. Since this is maybe our last show, maybe, when you look back at this season, you have to tell it to somebody who maybe didn't watch it, right? What do you say happened? Do you think it was a Zach Taylor masterclass of how to not coach football? The defense just didn't have enough talent to persevere. Offensive line, good but not great enough, like we thought they could be coming into this season. What do you say about this season to somebody who didn't watch it?
I think the Bengals were closer to what we thought they were going to be than a lot of people think. The offense was elite, as we expected, and we were wrong about, 2-3 pieces on defense?
Yeah.
We were wrong about the Sheldon Rankins signing as a fan base. We were wrong about the Geno Stone signing as a fan base. We were wrong about the step Cam Taylor-Britt was going to take this offseason as a fan base. I do think the secondary looks incredibly different if we're healthy.
It does.
Dax Hill got hurt early this year. DJ Turner got hurt playing the best football of his entire career against the Giants. We lose both of them, who are your corner 2 and corner 3. You're forced to run through guys that we picked up off practice squads. And how great do you expect it to be? The pass rush, the fix to the pass rush was Sheldon Rankins. And he's been out with an illness for 8 weeks.
There's one glaring camouflage that I think people get drawn to, right? And it's Joe Burrow. When you see Joe Burrow, you lose sight of everything else.
Correct.
And I think it's so much more difficult for a quarterback to carry a team solely.
Yeah.
By himself completely. I know Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Mike Gesicki, Chase Brown, they've had good years, but it's been Joe Burrow's show. This has been an MVP caliber season from our quarterback. And people see that and they say, why isn't this working? Every other quarterback has it working. Josh Allen, and we'll talk about the MVP race in a little bit, Josh Allen's been phenomenal. That's with losing key offensive players. That's without a defense.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's figured it out, and they've won the division. They're going to get the 2 seed in the AFC. Absolutely incredible. You look at the Bengals, you just think it should be better, and it didn't work. And that's what I would tell somebody. I would say, if you look at it, the deficiencies of this organization weren't enough to overcome one of the greatest seasons by a quarterback in the NFL. One of the best seasons in NFL history is going to equate to nothing.
Yeah, no, and that's the most frustrating part when we look back at this season is the record books are going to be chock full of the 2024 Bengals, and more than likely we're going to be sitting at home for the playoffs. It's just crazy.
Insane.
If you would have told any Bengals fan in 2021 when we get to the Super Bowl, when we finally start to kind of realize what we have in this city, the numbers Joe Burrow puts up, I'm sure most of them are saying, oh, well, that's our year.
Yeah.
That's the year we finally get over the hump. My thing is, if you go through the Bengals roster and talk about the guys you expected to play well, they are.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase, triple crown. It's the dream of a season for him. T Higgins, career year statistically in the games he's played in. Joe Burrow, we're talking about an MVP candidate below 500. You know how crazy you have to be in that conversation? And then Trey Hendrickson leads the league in sacks. Like, the star players on this team are having career years, and somehow the supplementary pieces just haven't been enough. It's draft swing and misses, it's supplemental free agent swing and misses, and that's what's handicapped this team, and that's why it's so frustrating. The stars are performing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you talk about Joe Burrow and the performance that he's had, ultimately we're going to look back and we're going to talk about the fact that the Bengals had their best quarterback of all time and their best wide receiver of all time in possibly one of their worst defenses of all time. And ultimately that's what the story of this year is going to be, is that no matter how good your offense is, when your defense is as bad as it was early on in this season, it's really too much to overcome. So hopefully they can overcome it and they get what they need this weekend. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about this year, it's either going to be the most magical year of all time and we're going to sneak into the playoffs and they're going to make a run, and next thing you know, we're going to be talking about the Bengals in the Super Bowl, or we're going to have our hearts crushed and we're going to be talking about what could have been. I pulled it up. I did some research, and I found a thread of the most unlikely playoff runs and scenarios at the end of the year. And we go back to 2008.
All right.
The 8-5-1 Philadelphia Eagles went into the final week of the season needing 9-6 Tampa Bay to lose to 4-11 Oakland, and 9-6 Chicago to lose to 7-8 Houston in the early game, setting up a win and in with the 9-6 Cowboys. So it's 8-5-1 Eagles, 9-6 Cowboys in the afternoon slot. The Eagles find a way to get it done.
How about that?
After early on getting a tie game. They get it done. They go on to lose the NFC Championship.
I'll up my number then. I'm upping it to 15%.
Oh! Let's go!
We'll up it. That swayed me.
I like that.
Next year, we're still on to this year, but if you add, since this is our last show here, we'll do a little bit of next season talk.
Maybe. Potentially.
Potentially the last show here. Next season, what are the main areas of concern? Casey, your number one area of concern heading into next season for the Cincinnati Bengals.
I want to stop talking about pass rush. We've been talking about it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
That's my number one concern. If they can just get another pass rusher, I think a lot of the other issues can be masked.
Absolutely.
So I think that is my number one thing that I want the Bengals to focus on. Fix the pass rush. I'm tired of talking about it. It needs to get fixed.
Yeah, people are going to think I'm crazy because of how the defense has looked. I think our biggest need's on offense. I think it's guard. I think having these two abysmal guards have really handicapped the run game, and it forces Joe to do so much off script. You get a better guard in there next to Ted Karras, I think even the level of play of that second guard increases. You go Orlando Brown, a really good guy in the draft or free agency, Ted Karras at center, and Marius Mims. I don't care who that fifth guy is. His floor is going to be raised by the talent around him. I think getting a guard in this offense could take it to another level. Now, look, that does you no good if you don't fix this defense at all.
Yeah.
But I think getting a guard in this offense could take it to even another level next year, and we've seen what it's done right now.
I'm going to give mine before Craig goes, and it's one that I shouldn't have to talk about ever. I should never have to discuss it. But the fact that the Bengals don't have a kicker heading into next season, that's a position that, honest to God, if we had a good kicker, it changes the outcome of 3 games this year. 3 games. You can't have a kicker that can't make 35-yard field goals. It's unacceptable. Evan McPherson, I love the guy. You've extended him. I don't know what you can do with that. I think you have to let him ride next year based on the fact that he was unable to finish this season. Maybe it was an injury. Maybe you can blame it on an injured foot or whatever the hell it is. But right now, Evan McPherson, not good enough to make it as a Bengals kicker. If you can't make 50-yarders at a somewhat consistent rate, you're useless. You're useless in today's NFL. The Cowboys have a guy who kicks 65-yarders regularly. I know it's probably a part of the reason why that offense kind of hasn't been as good this year, because you just settle for a Brandon Aubrey 65-yarder instead of trying to run good plays. But not having a kicker is mind-boggling. Greg.
Yeah, look, all of those are valid points, and I'd probably echo Casey a little bit with the defensive front and getting rushed up the middle. I'm also going to say that one of the big needs is they need to figure out what's going on at safety. Obviously, Geno Stone over the last couple of weeks has shown a little bit of ability. Von Bell was a complete and utter failure throughout most of the season and ultimately didn't bring a whole lot back to this team. Obviously, we didn't pay him a whole lot, but they need to figure out what's going on there. Jordan Bell and Geno Stone got absolutely smoked last week by Marvin Mims Jr. It seems like over and over again the secondary is disconnected and not able to keep big plays from happening, and that starts with the secondary. The corners, I think, are okay. When you get Dax Hill back from injury, you get DJ Turner back from injury, I think that unit improves enough where I feel comfortable going into 2025. I don't feel comfortable going into 2025 right now with Geno Stone and Jordan Battle being my safeties at the start of the year. They may work their way into winning those jobs. They need to be there needs to be a training camp battle for that safety position.
Yeah. There's a lot of question marks, and that's what our good friend Reed Mouse says a lot of the time. When you have more question marks than exclamation points, it's a big problem. And especially right now, the Bengals have so many question marks on that defensive side of the football. It's going to be difficult to overcome next year as well, but we'll see. It's a new season. I'm going to give them a reset after this year, and they get one more year before I say burn it all down.
Okay.
They get one more year. We only have 10 minutes left in the show, so what we're going to do, before we get back to the Steelers, I'm going to do one MVP talk. Lamar Jackson, 3,900 yards, 39 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, adding 850 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns. Josh Allen, 3,700, 28 touchdowns, only 6 picks, 530 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns on the ground. Joe Burrow, 4,600 passing yards, 42 touchdowns, 8 interceptions on the season, adding 202 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Shout out to the Giants. I think the MVP race is a lot closer if the Bengals had if they had 10 wins right now, I think Joe Burrow wins.
If they had 9 wins right now and playing for their 10th this week, I think he's probably the betting favorite.
Is there a chance? Is there a slimmer of hope that Joe Burrow wins the MVP if the Bengals, by the grace of God, and it would be God that having to guide the Bengals into the postseason, is there a chance Joe Burrow sneaks away with an MVP award that nobody thought he would win 5 weeks ago?
No. I don't think so. I don't think there is. And it's a real
it's a
shame.
Positive show.
Yeah, it's a real shame. And I'm going to get it positive. I'm going to come around to positive. Win-loss matters too much for MVP. It just does. And when you look at the standings, it always has, and that determines who wins it when things are close. And all 3 of these guys are putting up MVP seasons. If you compare their numbers to a lot of the past MVPs, all 3 of these guys would be no-brainers in that given season. Wins have to matter for MVP. Where wins don't matter and are not supposed to matter is All-Pro. If Joe Burrow is not a first or second team All-Pro in the AFC, I'm going to be pretty upset. Because his statistics are far better than Josh and Lamar. We all agree he would be the MVP if they had a couple more wins.
Yep.
And we've all established that that matters for the MVP. But that's not supposed to matter for the All-Pro voting.
That's
so
right.
Joe Burrow should be in the All-Pro team.
I'm going to go against you, Jacob.
Okay.
I think there's a chance that Joe Burrow can win the MVP award still. At the end of the day, you talk about wins and losses, and that's all that matters. Well, guess what? What has Joe Burrow done over the last 8 weeks? All he's done is put together quality starts, wins. And at the end of the day, if he's able to guide this team with a defense that we all know is subpar to a playoff appearance, I think there's enough noise around the league right now that he can earn the votes in order to get an MVP award. At the end of the day, right now, you look at all the pundits and you look at all the people that are talking about it. Everybody's talking about how disrespected Joe Burrow is right now when it comes to the odds. And I think as much as we want to ignore that, ultimately these voters, they're going to continue to hear that over and over and over again. And especially if Joe Burrow works his way into the playoffs over the next 2 weeks, imagine how much we're going to hear about the miraculous run that Joe Burrow went on over the last 8 weeks with this Cincinnati Bengals team, who couldn't hold a team under 30 points, and yet somehow Joe Burrow, diving through the air, found a way to will this team into the playoffs. I think there's a chance.
It's not a coincidence that his MVP odds and the Bengals playoff odds are the exact same number.
That's fair. Casey, you're the tie-breaking vote here.
I really want him to be able to get the MVP.
Then say it.
You know what? I think there is a small chance. When does the MVP voting end? Does anyone know here on this table?
It's before the playoffs.
It's regular
before the
season.
playoffs.
Playoffs don't matter.
Playoffs. Okay, so with one game left, I mean, if he has a just fantastic final
He'd have to
game,
get to 5,000 for me to even consider it.
Yeah, if he puts up 5,000, I think that there's a serious chance.
I agree in that sense.
5,000, 45 touchdowns, it would be a hell of a year.
What, 368 yards?
Yeah.
To get to 5,000? He could do it. He could do it. In the MVP conversation, I know Joe's probably not going to win it, but it is a pretty heated race. One of the better races probably in recent history. Both these guys dog walk last year's Lamar Jackson. Those stats were nothing compared to these. The only reason Lamar Jackson's not the overwhelming favorite for this MVP is because he's 1-2.
Yeah.
He's better than Josh Allen at really everything. They are winning the same amount of games. It's basically a wash in terms of record. When you watch them both play, they're both incredible, but you expect that out of MVP candidates. This is a perfect example of voter fatigue in terms of Lamar Jackson. This is a charity MVP for Josh Allen.
Tom Pelissero of NFL Network did a poll of NFL GMs and executives, and this was December 18th, so this was before the last 2 games where Joe Burrow has continued to show his superstar status. At that point, Josh Allen was the runaway MVP. He got 22 of the 27 votes. At that point still, Lamar Jackson and Saquon Barkley each only got 2, and Joe Burrow got 1. You look at what Joe Burrow's done over the last 2 weeks, I think that he's narrowed that edge. And again, if he gets into the playoffs, you look at Josh Allen, he's got Stephon Diggs who went down. James Cook leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns this year. He's got weapons around him. There's a lot of people who say, Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase. He's got T Higgins. Josh Allen has weapons too. It's not like he's alone. Lamar Jackson has Derrick Henry. He's not alone. Saquon Barkley, ridiculously, probably could have had 25 rushing touchdowns this year if it wasn't for Jalen Hurts stealing 11 of them on the goal line. But at the end of the day, I think this race, especially over the last couple of weeks, has really narrowed a lot more than people are giving it credit for. Josh Allen is probably still the favorite, but the way that Burrow's playing, if he can get this team into the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised to at least see him getting significant votes.
I would agree. I think there's a chance for Joe Burrow. I think there's a little bit of hope, especially if he does what Jacob says and just completely blows out the Steelers. 400 passing yards. You have 3 touchdowns in the game. And we know he's capable because we see it every single week.
We talk about him chasing 5,000 in this game, but he's not the only one chasing milestones. Chase Brown, we talked that he's questionable, but just 10 rushing yards away from a 1,000-yard rushing season. And we know he wasn't even the starting running back till about, week 6, week 7?
That's right.
So the fact that he's about to get there with 7 touchdowns on the ground and all he does in the receiving game is just absolutely incredible. And then T Higgins is pretty close to 1,000 yards. Obviously, it would take a big-time game, kind of like last week. He's at 858 yards, so 142 yards in this game. It would take a big one, but certainly close to striking distance. And with his injuries this year and the amount of time he's missed, if he's able to get to 1,000 yards with the 10 touchdowns he already has, what an incredible season for him.
Well, and Jamar Chase on the same realm. I mean, we talk about these guys being close to milestones. Jamar Chase needs 88 yards and a touchdown to become the first wide receiver ever with 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns in a season.
Wow.
You look at that over the course of the full season, he's on the cusp of joining the 101 club. 100 yards per game and 1 touchdown per game. That's a list that's only 12 players long right now. Jamar Chase could join that this season as well if he meets those numbers.
We did get a super chat, by the way. And
that's what prompted me to look it up. So, yeah, shout out Fuzzy Balls for the super chat.
If you don't know what a super chat is, people pay us on YouTube to ask a question or leave a message.
That's right.
That's what that is. All right, we're winding down. We're running out of time. I'm going to do one Bengals question, one takeaway. Bengals versus Steelers Saturday. Saturday night or Saturday afternoon?
Saturday night,
8 p. Prime time. What's the big thing the Bengals defense has to do to stop the Steelers? As you know, again, George Pickens has been a Bengals killer since he's been a Steeler. You have Pat Freiermuth, who's been okay this year. I think it's been a down year from Pat Freiermuth's standards coming in after last season. But Jalen Warren and Najee Harris are the two I'm going to keep my eye on.
Yeah.
I think they had okay games last time they played. Didn't really have to run because Russell Wilson could throw at will. If the Bengals defense is able to slow down Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. And I think Jalen Warren's taking more of the snaps as of late, too. If the Bengals are able to shove it down at least a little bit, I think Russell Wilson's not capable of throwing another 400-yard game.
My biggest issue, and you're right, it's the running backs, but it's not their running of the football. Last time the Bengals played the Steelers, they combined for 10 catches for 109 yards.
Yeah.
Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. That's not part of the Steelers' game, and they just dominated the Bengals with dump-off passes to their running back the entire game and led them to put up 44 points. Their two biggest players in that game. Just unbelievable that was really the Achilles heel of the Bengals the entirety of that game. They never made an adjustment to take that kind of play away.
Yeah.
Gonna have to do that in this one.
Craig, your biggest takeaway heading into Saturday night?
It's the deep ball. Jacob's talking about dumping off, but guess what? That dumping off brings the defense up and makes them guard against that. And then what happens? George Pickens, Calvin Austin, they beat you deep for the touchdown.
Yeah.
This Bengals defense, time and time again, has been beaten deep on touchdowns. They have to stop George Pickens. They can't allow Calvin Austin to get behind the defense. That's the biggest part for me.
Casey.
Wrap up.
Tackle.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I've never seen a team that's been unable to tackle quite like the Cincinnati Bengals the past 2 seasons.
But Jermaine Pratt, career high in tackles. So shout out to him.
He tweets.
He tweeted about himself.
Okay,
that's the only reason I knew. He tweeted about
makes
himself.
sense.
And Geno Stone also voted for himself for the Pro Bowl. So at least our guys love themselves.
This is insane. I didn't notice this before. The last time the Bengals and Steelers meet, every single receiver that caught a ball had a long catch of over 10 yards. Michael Pruitt, 18 yards. Ben Skoranek, 23 yards.
Unbelievable.
Calvin Austin, 23. Cordero Patterson, 20. Van Jefferson, 43. Najee Harris, 25. Jalen Warren, 29. Freiermuth, 25. And George Pickens, a long of 36. You can't give up the deep ball to this team. They're going to try. Russell is known for his deep ball ability. You can't let him do it.
We're going to end the show. This has been one heck of a season. Thank you to Champions Grille. Thank you real quick to Michael Ackley, Nathan Seltzer, David. Thank you guys for making the Davids I think, from California. Drove all the way here from California.
Unbelievable.
Thank you, David. Isaac's
he left
here.
last show.
We have
right
Isaac,
after last show, he left to make it.
Isaac, Zach, my father, Mr. Ram.
My mother, Juliet.
Zach's in the crowd. Everybody who's made it a point to come to these shows. Tim, for setting this up. Thank you very much.
That's right, yeah.
For having us this Bengals season. Sorry it didn't go our way. Maybe. It's not over yet. Maybe. But now it's time for our favorite guest. It's Brooke. Brooke, you end it every single time. What do you got for us?
All right, guys, this is my last ad read. I'm really sad, but
Maybe.
Maybe. We'll see after Sunday. My bad. But every UC home game and all Xavier and UC basketball games, we have $4 domestic beers, 23 ounces, the big ones for $4. Every UC and Xavier game.
Hi, Dad.
We got an approving nod from over there.
You have to give hi to your
Dad.
Okay, shout out to the all right, we're gonna do one last Who-Day to end it.
Okay.
You got it in you.
I say who?
No,
that's not how this works.
Oh,
No.
You just say Who-Day.
All you just gotta say is Who-Day, and they'll say it back.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Who-Day!
Who-Day!
Here we go. There we go, Brooke.
You. I like the who you say day. I like that.
Yeah, maybe we start that.
No,
maybe we
start
that.
That's all right.
Next year.
That's all right. You tried your best. This has been it, Chatterbox Sports. Thank you very much for coming out. We'll see you guys hopefully next season to a better. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Actually,
No, we'll see you next week.
Hopefully we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
But
Unreal.
This has been Chatterbox Bengals live from Champions Grille for maybe the final time. Thank you to Craig, Jacob, Casey for being here with me.
Thank you, everybody.
That's it. We'll see you guys later.